everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Hello. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. I'm so glad you're here today for this important report that I'm bringing you. You're going to want to grab a notepad, pencil, pen, or just some tablet, whatever you use to take notes, because this show is so important to fully understand why government education and any involvement of the government in education needs to end. Complete separation of state and school. Today, joining me, I have once again our Commoncore Diva, Lynne Taylor, who is bringing us some information that even I don't know about or fully understand. So I'm learning along with you, okay? She's going to be reporting to us about the International Labor Organization's recent announcement that all nations, particular member nations, of which the United States is one, we are a chief member and funder, are going to need to adhere to the SDG goals. This is like a pact that that we've made with the devil, if you ask me. But and we need to understand, she's going to explain to us how this is going to come down and feed through the Department of Labor to the Department of Education, and they're linked. Lynne's going to explain how that works too, because I've been pushing to get rid of the Department of Education, as have many of us. And Lynne will explain why that's not enough. That's not going to be enough to prevent this concerted effort to take over the minds of our children for purpose. And it's not their purpose, and it's not our purpose. It's this SDG purpose. If you're not familiar with what SDG goals are, Lynne will give us a little primer on that as well. But I hope you'll join me in welcoming Lynne Taylor back to The Reason We Learn. Please like, share, and if you're not already subscribed, subscribe to this channel. Hi, Lynne.
Hi, Deb. Oh, thank you so much for this opportunity to bring this breaking news.
This is so important. And when, I wish we could have done it sooner. We've been scrambling to get this show done with my limited time, but I am so grateful to you that you're bringing this to this platform. My audience needs to hear this. I need to hear this. And, every time I think I get it, there's another layer to peel back from this onion. So
absolutely.
Go for it. What do we need to know?
I'm going to let everyone know that in preparation for this show, I did send Deb quite a few links. And so, Deb, if you'll make sure you link those in the comments for everyone so that they can access all this information, because it's so much that to fully understand it, yes, we can break it down here, but then I invite you to go back and really look, because this is meant to cradle to grave, enslave every one of us, not to our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, but what the United Nations deems as what our skill needs to be to uphold the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm going to start with a quote from the International Labor Organization. This was back in 2019. The report reinforces findings of the report of the Global Commission for the Future of Work. It calls for a human concerted agenda with focus on people's wide-ranging capabilities. The organization of work can reinforce principles of democracy, equality, social cohesion, and sustainability. Now, that's a lot of buzzwords thrown into one to say what we're doing with this International Labor Organization is we're now in 2023 going to take an attitude like that and now come across the board and say, regardless of what country you're in, your employers will enforce Sustainable Development Goal standards in your workplace. And if you do not perform to the level that the International Labor Organization has put out for all the employers, then there will be penalties. And why does that matter to Americans? Because, as you said, we are one of the biggest funders of the International Labor Organization, which by default connects to the U.S. Department of Labor. Okay. Now, I'm going to pause right there, because you said you were a little fuzzy on how does this get over back into education. If you look at the framework for the Sustainable Development Goals, you will notice that education is number 4, labor or decent work for all is number 8. They're both red. What does that mean? Well, in color psychology, under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, anything that's in red or pink means that we have a frame, but we don't have a picture. And guess who's going to fill that picture in? It's not going to be you, what you do with your education or what you do with your job. It's going to be what was decided for you. And the reason those two interconnect, even in the US, is first of all, through the Every Student Succeeds Act, when we took the education standards that were by the states and it was taken over by the federal government, and they threw in the mandate that education ceased to be about academics but about workforce, because it said that all education must be aligned to the same post-secondary readiness standards as laid out by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Not an education law, which would be unconstitutional, but let's go back and look. Department of Labor is just as unconstitutional as well. So we have those two interconnected, okay, through the Every Student Succeeds Act. That is following the global model to unite the two. Now, here's the other kicker, the data mining that comes in from education and from labor, both at the state level and the federal level, both at your local level and your state level, both at your school to the state, anything that connects the two. It's the Student Longitudinal Data System. All right, that will track you from the time you move forward from kindergarten or preschool all the way through graduation of either high school or higher education. Now, coming on from the other side, from the Department of Labor, is the WQDI, which is Workforce Data Quality Initiative. And it comes from job and tracks it backwards to fit into education so that they are united at the hip. And this is what is so dangerous, because with this recent announcement, part of your performance is through data tracking what you do at work. So this isn't just about, hey, Deb, I want you to hold the pot here and I'm going to pour the paint in it. And if you don't hold that pot just right, I'm going to punish you. This is also looking at your personal private information that absolutely goes against your privacy rights, your civil rights. This goes against the Constitution. This goes against personal freedom. This puts you in a straitjacket, if you will. Now, here's the other part of the International Labor Organization announcement. It ties back all this data, all this performance into how well of a socially credited person you are to your society.
Just like China.
Yeah, just like
China.
What
China has.
Yeah. So
that's. I don't think, Lynne, that people see when most people hear you talk in America, they're like, oh, come on, they can't pull this off, right? What they don't understand, it's been done. It's happening now. It's not some crazy sci-fi concept that can't be implemented. It is happening right now in China. And if you could explain for us, because I know that you'll do a much better job, if you can explain for us the enforcement methodology, like how operationally does this work? When you speak about penalties, when you speak about your, there'll be penalties to your workplace. Like people, I think, oh, they don't have to do that. It's a free country. Da, da, da. Explain how they do it so people understand that our freedoms, so-called, even our Bill of Rights, does not protect us from this. And in fact, to a certain degree, the corporation, which already is a government entity, but anyway, the corporation's design almost requires them to follow these kind of dictates and mandates. Can you explain?
Absolutely. Now, most of the penalties have not been revealed yet, but I'm going to guess that docking your pay would be one of them. I'm also going to guess that it would be in the data mining, that your score is not at an acceptable level, because after all, this will tie to the social justice movement, especially using climate change and equity, not equality, but equity. Okay, so equity is usually about money. It's not about people. Equality is about people. So that would be absolutely, I think, where we would start to be concerned about, okay, if these are the penalties, what can I be doing? Because that's going to be key to where you work. But listen, when every employer has to do this, it's not going to matter if you go to public school, private school, or even homeschool. This is waiting for you when you get out of whatever educational setting you're in, which leads us right back in to the misnomer on school choice.
Right. It doesn't matter because, and we've seen already, haven't we, how quickly and easily somebody with the wrong views, the
Mm-hmm.
wrong behaviors can be shut down because their PayPal's shut off and they can no longer
Right.
collect payments, or their bank closes their account and holds their money.
Or
But it's
shrinks their
happened
credit,
all
or yes, shrinks their credit limit, which is happening right now.
right. So they can't borrow money to grow their business, hire new people, or
Right.
even run their business because our economy at this point is so credit driven that if you can't get access to credit, you can't function in America. You can't
Right.
function in most countries. So the access to money, the access to even a pool of labor, it could be decided that you can't hire people and you can't do the taxes and all that kind of stuff legally because they've decided that you are not a worthy employer. They could
Right.
decide that you haven't hired the right people, or you haven't, done the right things and genuflected to the god of equity well enough, and suddenly you can't run your business. So and before people say, well, that's illegal and that's fraud and that's it. No, they can do whatever they want. There's banking
Right.
commission with banking regulations. All it took for Joe Biden to tell the credit industry, the banks, etc., that we need to punish people who are responsible and successful was an executive order.
Right.
It's executive order. And without people who are going to rise up and say that is blatantly, grotesquely unconstitutional for you to demand that a bank charge an extra fee to the people with better credit than the people with worse credit, they'll keep doing it. So
Right.
even the Constitution, we were in a meeting yesterday. The audience, isn't aware, but Lynn and I were together in a meeting yesterday, and we were talking about the Constitution. One of the things that came up with the Constitution, and I made the point, I don't know if it was well received or not, but I made the point that we're past using the Constitution as our benchmark, because they've already redefined person. They've redefined person. They've redefined equality. They've redefined so many words in the past just 6 years that if you're looking to that to protect you, a piece of paper to protect you, it's not going to. Either the people, we the people, are going to demand that these things be enforced some kind of way. Okay, I'm not gonna leave y'all to figure out what that is, or we're at its mercy. They will do what they can do. So everything that Lynn is saying will happen, especially if you think it can't happen.
Well, absolutely. I mean, but think about this. You talk about the executive order that Biden put into place. Let's look at the executive orders that Trump put into place to lock
Mm-hmm.
in skill-based education rather than academics.
That's
Okay.
right.
Career tech
Nobody's
education.
hands are clean here, guys.
No, but no, it doesn't. This is so far beyond the right versus left. This is a us versus them, and this is why it's so important to reach people, no matter what political leaning they have, to go, wait a minute, you need to put that aside. Let's look at what they're really wanting to do to your children and to your family. But let's take the penalties a little closer to home. All right, you can't grow your business. What happens when you don't get enough of a paycheck? You can't feed your family. And then what do? You have to go get help. And what is the government saying? Ah, we can feed you for free down at the school, because that's part of the full community services that are coming,
You
that
can't
have been
afford health
coming.
insurance. It's okay. The school's now a hospital with access to
Right.
Medicaid.
And double dipping with the Medicaid funds
And your
and
kid
doing
is now
things without
anxious because they're
parental
hungry.
consent. Yeah.
Oh, you have mental health problems. Okay, we've got some drugs for that.
Yeah, we've got some
We'll give it
therapy
to
for
them at the
that. And we
school.
don't have to tell mom and dad.
Mm-mm.
Absolutely. But this all works in through, like I said, when the Every Student Succeeds Act was put into de facto rule, because again, it's absolutely unconstitutional to have federal education laws. It took in power order: health and human service, then labor, then education. So by giving health and human services, labor, preference over education, we then just turned it in from academics to nothing but workforce prep factories. And again, because the funding that comes with this through your states comes through education, labor, health and human services, commerce, agriculture, housing and development. It has every aspect of your life roped in to this triune bastardization of what was supposed to be feeding the mind so that you could go pursue what you wanted to do, not what a test given to the school to have you take says, well, this is where we're going to slot Deb.
Well, and the thing is, Lynn, most of our audience has so bought into the notion that schooling, education, all the way up through graduate school is job prep. I mean, line up 10 parents, 9 out of 10 of them will look at you like, but job prep, but jobs, but getting a job, but having a degree, job, but having a high school diploma, job. It's so automatic. I don't even think people are conscious of it. And I wish that every parent, I truly wish every person watching this would go and read The Hidden History of America's Public Education System, or I'm getting the title a little mixed up, by John Taylor Gatto. Go and look at, School World, go and look at School World Order, the book.
John did a good job on that one. End of Work is another one. The End of Work, that's an old one. There were 5 books that Charlotte recommended that every person interested in tracking all this happened. And it was School World Order, A Place Called School, The Global Age of Schooling, End of Work, and then the Research Guide for the Goals 2000. Those 5.
And that's in modern day. Like I said, if you go back to the history of education, back to Horace Mann, back to John Dewey, back to the people who, gave us this system, which is not American. It is Prussian. It was designed to make compliant little factory workers out of the diverse, pluralistic, wonderfully, unique society that America was building, with different cultures coming in and forming in this melting pot. No, we have to control the product that comes out of that melting pot. We need to make sure it's a milkshake, not a salad. And they decided they were going to have this public system and mandate it. And everything since has been them butting heads with the Constitution and finding workarounds because their little system didn't work so great, did it? In other words, for a while, it actually had some okay results as far as teaching kids to read. And, it was fine. So it wasn't working quickly enough to make us into the serfs. They had to, so we have a department for this. And once they had that health and human services, once the American people bought into the notion that your federal government, that any government, even your state government should have anything to say about your health and your family and what you eat and where you live, that they should have anything to do with it.
Right.
Then it was over. That's inherently un-American and inherently against individual rights.
Absolutely it is. And one of the things that we need to remember is that because this International Labor Organization has such a chokehold on the Department of Labor, the Department of Commerce, the State Department, because guess what? All those play into international data standards. Those all work into international work agreements. And of course, every one of those are part and parcel of the United Nations. But we need to understand this is not about having you be free. It's about grooming you to be that workforce widget for that greater global good. And it all sounds so nice and lovely. Oh, we're all going to be fat, dumb, and happy. We'll be singing Kumbaya. No one will be hungry. No one will be poor. Are you kidding me? We're all going to be working for the state. And people like us who've long since kissed education goodbye as far as us being in the classroom, we will be upskilled or reskilled, because as long as you are capable, you will be working somewhere for someone doing whatever is assigned to you. And it's not oh, I'll just go pick up the garbage. It's no, we have to build everything for that sustainable development goal city, that sustainable development goal house, that sustainable development goal existence.
That's
Because
right.
in the sustainable development goal targets for number 4, it tells you that you will get basic reading and math for sustainability building. When you get to
Yep.
sustainable goal number 8, which ties to the International Labor Organization, it says your skill will be for nothing more than sustainable development um, fruition.
Yep.
What does that tell you about your future or your children's future? What does that, how angry does that make you? Because if it doesn't, it should.
The presumption. So even if you're sitting now out there listening to us and you think and you genuinely think they won't get away with it, or it will be like everything else, like every other time, people in the managerial class in history have thought that they could create utopia, that they knew what was best for everyone and they could make perfect humans if they would, if the stupid unwashed masses who just refuse to bend the knee to their PhD would just listen to them, that everything would be perfect, the world could be perfect. These are inherently, by the way, extremely pessimistic people with no love in their heart and no joy in their souls. In every time in history they've been given the power to do this, there have been hundreds of millions of dead. Okay. So, if it doesn't piss you off that there are people who even presume to think about doing this again, however well they may or may not implement it, however much you think you're going to get away with, going off grid, or I'm not going to pay attention, or my kids are out of the school, it doesn't affect me. My kids are out of the school, but I still do this show. Lynn doesn't have
Because
kids in the
it's still,
school.
well, when I started, they weren't in the system. But guess what?
Exactly.
When they graduated, where'd they get? In the system, just like everybody else, because it's not reserved for public K through 12. This is
That's
meant
right.
for community college, early enrollment, dual enrollment, AP, IB, hybrid, online, you name it, charter, whatever. It's here to stay because, as you pointed out, they had to find a way to speed this up. Now, I can't remember the dude's first name, but his last name was Owen, and he was considered to be the father of socialism. He mucked up France's education system first. Then he came to America in 1818 and said, oh, yes, the state is much better prepared to educate our young people than the parents ever were. And guess what? It stuck. And the more industrialized and institutionalized the education system became, the more the parents gave up their sovereignty over their children and said, oh, you know what? They're right. They can do a much better job. And oh, by the way, I can go have more time to bake bread or whatever it is that I need to get done. And by the time the Civil War was over, around 1869-ish, okay, when the South was supposedly defeated, the North, with their institutionalized system of education, came to the South and said, get on board. And what did the South do? They got on board. And then when the West was uh, settled, they took it there too.
But you know what's ironic? The
What?
best schools, in my personal opinion, in other words, the ones that were actually doing, in many
Mm-hmm.
cases, the best job of educating the actual students in knowledge and
Right.
classics and
Right.
information, were the segregated Black schools, because the federal government, the local government was like, whatever. We don't, we're not paying any attention to you. We don't care what happens to you. They believed their own PR
Yeah.
and figured, one way to keep them down is pay no attention to them and keep them off in their sequestered little segregated school. But of course, not being allowed to learn to read when they were slaves, and even to a certain extent sharecroppers and so on, the people who went there to teach
Mm-hmm.
those kids were absolutely mission driven, that their kids were going to learn and their kids were going to read. And you saw literacy rates above the same socioeconomic level of the white children. So I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying their schools were better than, let's say, like a prep school in New England or something at the time. I'm not saying
Right.
that. What
I
I'm
know. I get your point. I do.
But
And I
if you
think
take
it's,
the poor white family and the poor Black family at the same time period, that poor Black kid was probably reading Plato, and the other one was like Guffey's Reader or something.
well, I don't know, because I know that every population regardless of skin color, has had some sort of screw put to them by this federal Department of
That's true.
Education. Now,
That's
let me
true.
touch on that real quick, and then I want to get back to some of this news announcement, okay? And I lost my point. Oh, no.
I should add that's if they were allowed to go to school, because in many cases their families couldn't part with them because they had to work. Because
Yeah.
they could, and then of course nobody was coming along to make sure they were in school. So it is a double-edged sword. I'm by no means advocating segregation. I'm just saying
Oh,
when
no.
when the government is involved in your school, it's a bad thing.
It absolutely is. And one of the ways they got away with incrementally putting the data tracking is because I said, oh, well, Deb, we need to get your daughter's information or your son's information from your school. But it's going to stay right there. It's going to stay right there. Nobody else is going to see it.
Yeah.
Then it gets reported to the state. Now, the federal government by law cannot nationally collect data, which is full of what. But if they get the states to work together, Deb, to bury those little data trails, guess what?
Anything they want.
I can look at it because you've already done the work for me. And this was one of the things that was so draconian when the Student Longitudinal Data System and that Workforce Quality Data Initiative were set up, was because it took advantage of those and it married them. And so now it's just a free for all, and data stays within your region because, again, under Every Student Succeeds Act, those assessments, those job slotting assessments, if they don't marry up with the previous past 3 years, which we're well into ESSA by now, so 3 years has been there and done that, okay? But the point of it was when it first was put into place, you had to use either the same assessment as the 3 years prior, or one that could data talk to any of the ones that you used before. So these states thinking, oh, well, Betsy DeVos told us that Common Core is dead. And, oh, now we have Every Student Succeeds Act. And, oh, goody, we're not using this assessment anymore, but we're using this one. Well, if you go and you look at the assessments, they're the same bloody thing. They just might have a new name, but they still have to marry with the data. That's still going on. So then we saw it go from state to state sovereignty, which that was chucked out when we took, sold our states out for federal money eons ago. But then you start to see where it goes regional. And regional is key to who? The Sustainable Development Goals, because it's key to who? The United Nations. Now, let me go back to that International Labor Organization announcement. They're going to take higher education, apprenticeships, pre-K, anything that they can possibly do to get it so that your child, no matter what setting, or you, no matter what setting, even in a job, are going to have opportunity for that lifelong learning. And if you look at the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, who helped coin lifelong learning, it doesn't mean I'm going to be that sponge every day and I'm going to soak up all the knowledge that I possibly can. It means you're on an education to work treadmill. And if you're not learning, you're earning. And if you're not learning the right thing, then you can't go earn for someone else. So it's this constant treadmill. Now, that's one thing that will degrade humans. Here's the other. There is color psychology behind every one of the Sustainable Development Goals. There absolutely is. And I did this years ago. It was probably 2017 when I took colored pencils and I sat in my library and I pulled out every one of the 17 colors and I told you, this is what it meant. This is what it's going to do. Well, we're going to fast forward just a minute because I want folks to understand when it talks about the principles of democracy in this statement, equality, social cohesion, and sustainability. Social cohesion means collectivism.
Yeah, what else would it mean? I'm like wondering.
But someone's going to hear that. Oh, well, there's nothing wrong with that. So here we go. Real quick. Anything go ahead.
I just wanted to show this is where people need to go. I'm going to put this link and all these links in the description
box. Oh, yeah. Josh and I had a wonderful time on that show. We absolutely did. But, you've got to understand what you're hearing are buzz phrases, but what you're seeing is also playing into your mind, because in that show that I did with Josh, we went over not only the sustainable development colors, but we went over the colors that commercials use to propagandize the product that you're buying. And so every color has a meaning. Didn't know if anybody knew that. So we're going to run through real quick, okay? Anything that's red or pink, this means, again, like I said, frame but no picture, but the UN defines the picture, okay?
Right.
Orange, post 2015 millennial development goal were agreed, but there wasn't enough collectivism at that point. So they're still orange because we haven't gotten everybody socially cohesive yet. Yellow, we don't have enough partners on board yet. So let's ramp up those public-private partnerships. Again, defined by who? The World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and the United Nations. If it's blue, again, post 2015 millennial development goals. Remember, they switched them at that point from millennial to sustainable. Those were going to be, oh, wait a minute, we don't have enough legislation. So this would be where your cities and your states and your nations are going to go, how can we pump up more legislation for climate change or green or any of the other junk that's going on? And anything that was green, this was agreed upon in those, but it will continue to railroad the agenda. So this is where the International Labor Organization is going to use it for inclusiveness as well as economic growth. We're putting economy before people. And when you do that, you might as well put on the fascist flag and say, sign me up.
I'm so glad you said that, and I'm so glad you used the correct word. There are very few people today who either understand or are willing, if they do understand, and that, to use the word fascist. We've done such a great job of connecting that word, not even with Mussolini, who started it, but with Hitler, that people assume that or Antifa or whatever, where it becomes a little bit of a joke, people assume that in order to use that word correctly, you've got to have the whole 9 yards, like people in prisons and gulags, whatever. No, fascism is essentially how China's being run right now. It's not communism.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not capitalism. It's fascism. Absolutely, it is fascism, including the militarization and military industrial complex that underlies all of it and keeps the threat and the fear alive constantly, because these societies exist on fear. It's not as much that they militarize and use police force and everything every day to keep you in check like Hitler had to do. It's that you're afraid of what will happen if you step a toe out of line. How many in the audience right now, you're not here to raise your hand, but think to yourself and be honest. How many of you have tailored what you've said at work or in social media or in a social gathering or in a public place to the fear you have that someone will hear what you really think and bad things are going to happen? You'll lose your job. You'll lose a friend, a relationship will end, or you won't get a future job if you lose this one, etc. Okay. We are all operating right now in a threat level that is far and away above what it was 10 years ago and above what it was 10 years before that. And it keeps escalating to the point where, as Lynne is pointing out today in the show, you will not even realize that your decisions have been controlled by other people and your fear of them. They won't need guns. They won't need police. They won't need anything because you're going to be willfully handing your children over to this system. And a reason, Lynne, that I brought the link up to show while you were speaking, is again, I don't want anyone to get all comfortable in the notion that this isn't some legitimate organization. What she's talking, it's probably some like crazy conspiracy. Look at this. Do you think the UN is a real organization? Do you think that, the U.S. Department of Labor is a real organization? Because these are all linked. And you can go yourself, and I will have the links below if you're watching.
Because I pulled it all together.
It's all together. You go and do the work that Lynne has done. You read it all for yourself. And if you come away with some kind of different viewpoint, knock yourself out and explain it to everybody else. But this is what Lynne has done for the past, 25 years?
something like that.
Yeah, analyzing this stuff. So, go for it. Try to make yourself feel better. This is a real threat. When you can have a blog of an organization called the International Labor Organization that says, amid crisis, there's reason to hope if we come together to pursue. What crisis? What crisis?
Yeah.
There is no crisis.
Well, there's the manufactured ones.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
People in this managerial class, in order to justify their existence of moving paper from one side of the desk to the other, that essentially changes lives, like ruins lives, starves people to death because of things they do in their well-appointed, office in some high-rise someplace or in Davos or on their private jet flying back and forth. They manufacture this stuff to justify making these godlike decisions for everybody else. I reflected on what the current state of affairs means for the world. And
but notice that this particular page will mention the WEF, the World Economic Forum. It'll sit there and tell you, oh yeah, we have the ILO, then we have the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs.
Did y'all vote for any of this? Did y'all
None
vote
of us
for
did.
This? Did Congress sign on to some treaty on your behalf saying we agree to submit to these rules? No, you didn't. But we're funding this organization with your tax dollars, and they're making these decisions. And then these decisions are because we are a global economy, because there's no getting out of that. That horse left the barn ages ago. Because money is fungible, because this is how things work economically, we are ending up with a fascist system, not because the evil Republicans and the evil Democrats and they're just puppets. They're all puppets of this.
Mm-hmm.
This.
Absolutely.
This is what runs the world, not Republicans or Democrats.
Yes. And I'm so glad you said that, because this is absolutely more proof than ever that we are being micromanaged. We're not living freely. We haven't for decades. This has just been a slow, progressive burn up until it reached a point where they were like, well, we got to turn the water up. We got to turn the heat up because we aren't boiling enough frogs.
That's right. And, people are probably listening to us right now, they're probably saying, okay, well, you've got me sufficiently scared.
Okay.
Some are thinking we're crazy. Okay, fine. Bye.
That's okay. I've been called
and that's fine. Like, go read it for yourself. Don't believe us. But, look at the world that you were born into. If you're over 50, look at the world your parents grew up in. And you're going to sit there and tell me with a straight face that it's all just because of technology that things are different now? No.
Or that what we knew was so old fashioned that what we're seeing is so much better.
Oh yeah, it's so much better. Kids who can't read and write and have, chronic depression all the time, and the number of suicides before they reach the age of 12. That wasn't, I mean, come on. I didn't know a single person in my young, like, let's say up to through middle school. I didn't know a single kid that committed suicide. Okay. My kids now know several.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Like not normal. That's not normal. And this is just escalating and getting worse. And then same with adults. Every time you go to the store, look at your receipt. Every time you fill up on gas, look at your receipt. When you go to work and you're trying to get a job done and you realize you're doing the job of 2 or 3 people. And you wonder why you're so burnt out.
Checkouts, yeah. And that's part of the being replaced, though, with the artificial intelligence, which plays right back into this International Labor Organization, because what they're finding out is that your social credit will be your avatar, and you're going to be worth more on the computer than you are as a living, breathing, wonderfully made human being. And that is a disgrace to our creator. That is a disgrace to how you have been able to, live your life and be free and exercise and whatever. No, you're going to be stuck somewhere, and it may not be where you want to. And if you think that, oh, well, those sustainable development goals aren't that bad, I can still do this, I can still do that. Think about the fact of where we're setting up rack and stack and pack housing. Tiny neighborhoods where you don't have to go anywhere for anything. Think about the person who needs to get out in nature. Well, you're not going to have nature. If you do, it's going to be what's this tiny patch that you could go to. What's going to happen to our beaches? What's going to happen to, well, it's going to
Well,
be
you
for the
can't go to the
haves.
beach
I
because,
know.
you're too
You're
messy
going
and
to mess
dirty.
it up. You're going to ruin the ocean.
Yeah.
So,
You
and
can't live because you human are a blight.
yes. And we've turned it from worshiping the creator into the creation. And that is a very, very dangerous road to go down. And again, this is putting economy and everything else above humans, and that is not the way that it was supposed to be. That's not the way that it has run successfully for decades and in centuries. But this
Nope.
is what we're living in, and I just wanted to get back to one thing, and then I want to tell you guys what's going on my blog. This competency-based education, this skill-based education, outcome-based education, they're all the product of Skinner, Mann, and this man named Owen, who brought it with him. And yes, it is a Prussian model. We have people who in modern day government have embraced it with everything, both on the R side and the D side, and said, oh yes, let's really just up the ante on the skill-based education in our K through 12 system, no matter where you are. Let's pump up our apprenticeships. Let's pump up all this other stuff. And what's the end game? Kowtowing to international labor organizations, agreements, and pacts from the G7, the G20, from a World Economic Forum, people making decisions for you, thinking you literally will not be able to think your way out of a paper bag, because after all, they have even made the paper bag.
Right. Exactly. Can I show you something that let's see if I can pull it up. I found a picture that perfectly illustrates, in my opinion, the image of what it is that they would do to us, as far as, like you mentioned, how we would live and everything would be defined for us. And I
Right.
found an image that really perfectly captures it from real life.
Okay.
And this is a picture of a neighborhood in Dubai.
Oh,
Oop, where did it go? I meant
it
to.
went.
Oh, sorry. Let me put it back up. Let me put it back up. I don't know why that went away.
That's okay.
But okay, come on. All right, share. There we go. So there
Yeah,
it is.
there it
This is
is.
a real place. This is real life. This
Totally,
isn't
totally
somebody's
man-made.
imagination.
Totally man-made. And the labor that went into that was peasant labor from all over the world.
Right. So we know there's a lot of wealth in Dubai, and
Oh,
yet
yeah.
still, even as wealthy as the people who own these homes probably are, where's the individuality? This is brutalism. By the way, if people are wondering like what style of architecture that is, that's called brutalism.
Thank you.
It's
Mhm.
very sad and depressing. Human beings are organic organisms. Like
We need trees. We absolutely
right.
need
Each of
trees.
us is different, and we evolved to live, believe it or not, in nature, not in buildings. So when we've built buildings that at least reflected like artistry, personality, something that we were elevating that was of our values, some kind of beauty or whatever. Think about the Chrysler building, for example, with those beautiful
Right.
ornate stuff on the top. Okay, then at least we were saying, all right, if we have to make this concrete kind of a jungle, let's make it as pretty as we can. This is anti-nature, anti-life, anti-human.
Mhm.
This is a place like where robots live. This is a place where people who are not allowed to think for themselves
Mhm.
would live, because you cannot, how do you live in this kind of an environment and not eventually get affected by it?
Right.
And people would say, but it's
Absolutely.
clean and it's luxurious and it's safe and it's this and it's that. And like, yeah, we're not designed to live in something that is quite that safe. That's how you
Well,
get like
it's
rat mentality.
institutionalized is what it
Yeah,
is. It's not really safe. It's institutionalized, because don't tell me they won't be tracking you in there.
that's right. That's right. I don't know what this is. If this might be a very, it's not a minaret because it's too skinny to climb. So this could be a cell tower. This could be some kind of cameras. I have no idea. But the whole place looks absolutely terrifying, almost Truman Show-esque. And
I
I
was
just
just
wanted to,
thinking while you were talking, that would be a good example. The
yeah,
Truman Show, when he finally realizes that it's all been a staged play.
yeah, that's it. And so I
Absolutely.
just wanted to show that because what you were describing, I think it's important for people to see real life examples of this
Absolutely.
to realize this
Abs-
isn't some sci-fi movie that we're describing. This is real.
Absolutely. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Okay. Well, what I've got going on the blog. Um, we all know that Charlotte Iserby left us a couple of years ago, and we know what a wonderful whistleblower she was because she did call out the fact that part of the skill based shift that we saw happening in education was due to Reagan signing an agreement with Gorbachev for technology. Well, that has played up into part of what we are. Well, in her
Yeah.
whistleblowing, it did cost her her job, but she went on to do wonderful work to help inform us all. One of the things that she wanted to do was to finish her mission that she started about raising awareness of the dangers of school choice. Now, she found my work. We were able to have some conversations. Lo and behold, long story short, I have her bumper stickers that she had made that clearly say, um, school choice and charters will kill private education.
Mhm.
I wish I could update the bumper sticker to say a little bit more because it's not just charters. The whole goal behind school choice, and this is why it's so key to understand that the Democrats are playing it from, oh, we'll save you from your zip code hell that you're in your school. And the
Right.
Republicans are going, oh, well, we're going to save you from the mean, nasty Democrats, and we're your family savior, and we're going to use school choice funds so you can do what you want to. What they're both not telling you is that behind the scenes, they are like this when it comes to school choice.
That's
School
right.
choice under Every Student Succeeds Act negated choice as we knew it because all the funding was funneled down through your schools through the healthcare, the labor. We've said every bit of that. But here's the thing: that's our taxpayer money. So now we're
Mhm.
looking at taxation without representation, which if you look
Yeah.
on my blog, and this is going to be commoncorediva.com, and you're going to want to go to the school choice resource tab that's been put together, and it will tell you that on July 31st of 2013, Charlotte Iserby of Dresden, Maine, along with Steve Schran of New Gloucester, protested outside the main Heritage Policy Center luncheon at Portland's charter school, Baxter Academy. And of course, it tells you the photo credit. Now, Charlotte has a sign that says red, and of course, her bumper sticker's at the top, and it says taxation without representation equals. Then she says at the very top, corporate fascism. Then below that,
Mhm.
socialism, and then communism. Her friend has a white sign that says your child is human capital for training only. So I have that image. So what I'm offering everyone is an opportunity. If you vote, if you're a candidate and you think you really understand school choice is about giving you freedom, it's about taking that freedom away. It's about shutting down every form of private education, including homeschooling,
That's right.
rebranding it as public, thus putting it under national control. So local representation under school boards, gone. And if they're going to start with taking away your local representation on school boards, think about how easy it's going to be to take your local representation of
That's right.
any kind in voting, because taxation is tied to voting. It's in our Constitution, protected under the Article 4, I believe it is, because
Right.
that's where the representation was set up. You start taking away representation, you now shift from a constitutional republic to a full out democracy member state of the United Nations. So not only will you get the bumper stickers, you're going to get one page information sheets that you can hand out to voters or candidates. You're going to get links to videos and articles that will prove to you not only what Charlotte said, but where I've been able to take it since Charlotte passed to be able to prove this. This is not
That's right.
about choice. It is about taking your voting rights away. And if there's one thing, Deb, we've got to make sure that we preserve, it's our voice in how things are done.
Well, people in certain states in this country, California, New Jersey come to mind.
Right.
Pennsylvania is following pretty quickly, and so is Oregon. and Washington, basically the coast, but don't think you're safe in the middle either. I've seen some horrifying things out of Iowa, Kansas, and
Oh, it's
Indiana.
everywhere. It's
It's
everywhere.
everywhere. If you start really paying attention to school board meetings, you will see government, basically either infiltrating into the meetings by having members be, they're like union members and different people like that,
Mhm.
or just plain making rules
Mhm.
that make it impossible for the school board to do anything. So even when a school board says we're not going to do X, then suddenly you end up
Right.
with your own attorney general of your state suing your school board. This
Well,
is
that was
happening
the
right
other
now.
right, and that was the other part of the venture capitalism that has taken
Yeah.
over education, is to kill school boards because parents are not needed. And you just had your Department of Education secretary sit there and basically tell you
Mhm.
teachers are the parents. Whether they really are or they aren't is beside the
Right.
point. So yeah, but
Well,
this
there's
is
no
what
such thing as other people's children, Lynn. Didn't
it's
Joe Biden just say that to us less than a month ago?
oh,
All
it's
the
the
children are the
it's
nation's children.
it's the village
That's like
idiot.
a Hitler quote,
Yeah,
by the way.
yeah, it is. It absolutely is. But we heard that, a few administrations ago. But again, not just picking on the D's. The R's have done a bad job of carrying this stuff on. But yeah, that is what I've got going on right now. And it's imperative with these elections coming on that we make sure folks get this information, because either your candidate is not telling you simply because they don't know it, or maybe because they don't want you to know that they know it and what the ulterior motive is. But when people wake up and see this is about way more than education, but attacking your voting system as you know it, that makes
Right.
a big deal.
That's right. And even, people who don't know the history, like I said, I really encourage all of you parents to, to learn more about the history of education in America,
Yeah.
because what we're describing is just the logical progression of
Mhm.
everything that was begun over 150 years ago
Yep.
to now. This is a feature, not a bug. This is always where it's
Absolutely.
going. It's
Yeah.
just been slow for them because of the
Mhm.
freedoms and rights that we had, initially enshrined in the Constitution. But what happens when you take a government run system and you don't teach each successive generation about how those documents are meant to work, or you
Right.
don't empower the citizens that you claim to be empowering for life in democracy or whatever? We're not a democracy, by the way, but that's what they'll
Right.
say.
Right.
What happens when you don't actually teach civics, when you teach your version of it, or the action civics from the 60s on, is you get a population who embraces their own servitude. That's
Absolutely.
what you get. The
And that
Soviets must have
right.
sat back in the 80s and been like, this is awesome. We don't have to do anything. It's being done for us. Thank you, John Dewey and
And what
Horace
do we
Mann.
see now? We see entire subgroups of our population doing the same thing.
That's right. And John Dewey said, and I'm going to get the quote wrong because I don't have it at my fingertips, but he
Okay.
basically said that parents were handing over children to be hostages
Yeah, that
to
was
the
it.
cause
Yeah.
of this, unified hive mind
Right.
state thing, whatever
Right.
culture. And it was only right and proper that they do so because
Right. But
reasons.
beware of those who claim that somehow this school choice will be the hostage fear, because it
No.
absolutely will not be.
Well, you cannot crossbreed. I've been saying this all week. I
Yeah.
made a little meme about it. You cannot crossbreed free liberty, okay, an individual liberty, and forced participation. You can't do those two things. That
Absolutely.
doesn't work.
Absolutely. Hang on just a second. This plays right into this. Sorry, I did not have this ready, but I want very quickly, okay, because I know we're coming up on the end of our time. Unalienable rights are the inherent, sovereign, and natural rights that existed before the creation of the state, and which, being antecedent to and above the state, can never be taken away, diminished, altered, or levied by the state except by due process of law. Nor can any unalienable right be fundamentally removed or waived by contract, whether by non disclosure, which is fraud and unenforceable in law, or knowingly by sufferance, which is contrary to the spirit of law and prejudicated to sovereignty. The original, permanent, and unalienable rights of every man or woman include the right to life, freedom, health, pursuit of happiness, the right to contract or not contract, which is unlimited, the right to earn a living income by being compensated with wages or salary in a fair exchange for one's work, the right to travel in the ordinary course of one's life and business, the right to privacy and confidentiality free from unwarranted invasion, the right to own whole property without trespass, lawfully without trespass, the right to self-defense when threatened with harm, loss, or deceit, the right to due process of law with notice and opportunity to defend, the right to be presumed innocent, suffering no detention or arrest, no search or seizure without reasonable cause, the right to remain silent when accused to avoid self-incrimination, the right to equality in the eyes of the law and equal representation, the right to trial by jury, being an impartial panel of one's peers, the right to appeal in law against conviction or sentence, or both, the right to expose knowledge necessary to one's rights and freedoms, the right to peaceful association, assembly, expression, and protest, the right to practice a religion and to have beliefs of one's choosing, the right to love and to consensual marriage with children as family, the right to security from abuse, persecution, tyranny, and war, the right to refuse to kill under command by reason of conscience, the right to live in peace and be left alone with when law abiding. Surely the most critical failure of the people is their failure to ensure the teaching and common knowledge of their unalienable rights. And if you do not know your rights, you effectively have none. By the path of ignorance, whether by apathy or deception, the people arrive in a state of exploitation, oppression, and tyranny.
Correct. And notice nothing on there could be equated to stuff or services.
Yep.
So, when people talk to you about, I have a right to an education.
No, you don't. It's a privilege. It's a
you have a right to
privilege.
pursue it. That's it. That no one can arbitrarily cut you off from accessing, as you described there, the means to make yourself aware of your rights. Okay. So if books exist and you need to be able to either buy them, borrow them, or go ahead and read them without someone coming in and going, you can't do that. If it's your choice and your private time somewhere else, I don't have to pay for that.
Right.
I don't have to pay for that. It is not your right you don't have a right to force me to pay for that reading material or pay for the access to that stuff. But I can't stop you from going and getting it somewhere either.
Absolutely.
So if somebody else wants to give it to you, or you want to buy it from someone, write some free mutual exchange, and that's your right, not the right to get things.
Well, absolutely. Right.
You didn't provide for yourself.
Absolutely it is. But, let's remember one thing. The UN, under the Declaration of Human Rights, especially for the children, education is a right. Under COVID, and I just did a presentation on SGD number 4, okay? And this was part of the research that I found. Under COVID, the UN flipped it from being a right to a lifeline. It's neither. It is not a right. It is not a lifeline. It is a privilege.
That's right. It is right. And when the value that both the recipient and the giver are going to attach to that thing is proportional to how much they think it is their due. If I think something is coming to me just because I'm breathing, I'm not going to consider it very valuable.
Right. Absolutely.
It's already there. I'm going to take it for granted. I'm not going to really appreciate it. If I have to actually work to get something, if I have to ask, may I have it, from the people who can provide it and offer it, it's going to have a whole different meaning. And this is where the flip side of having all these positive rights, meaning rights that allow me to take from other people at gunpoint, is that you end up with a lot of fear, anger, resentment, and low quality.
Absolutely.
What people are give you because there's a gun to their head when they give it to you is not going to be as good as if it was voluntary mutual exchange, because they know that you're going to come back, whether it's good or crap, because you have to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Deb,
welcome to education in America.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me come on.
Do that too. Oh,
Yeah.
letting you, please. You're doing me a favor because I could not possibly have explained the inner workings, and I'm going to put these links. So if you're watching in the replay or, replay, this is recorded, but if you're watching, they will be down there before this gets out while we're recording. I
Okay.
don't have anything up. So, but
Okay.
Lynne, thank you so very much.
You're so
And I look
welcome.
forward to your next report. I can't wait. Every so often I get this like bombshell. There's more.
Oh,
So
well,
I say I look forward to it. I don't know if I look forward to it, but I always look
well,
forward to talking
but
to you.
we've got to do it, Deb. We absolutely have. I mean, the days of us being the leisurely moms went when we decided to stick up for our kids, and I'm so glad we did.
Yes. And I'm so glad that you did and that I am privileged to know you. So thanks everyone. Please, will you like and share this broadcast so more people can hear it? And I will make sure that you have Lynne's links, and please go and subscribe so you can know when she's updating her blog and updating her podcast. Make sure you listen to it, because then you will be on the cutting edge. Like, you will know what's going on because Lynne will make sure that you do. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.